Hi, I'm Gail Gross with Greetings from Gail, and thank you for joining me today. I've got a fun project. This is a mini-bendi card, and I'm using the Kitchen Gnomes stamp set from Close to My Heart to create this. Not only will we do this card, but I'm going to start off just with the basics of how a mini-bendi works so that you can create something of your own with the stuff that you've got in your stash right now. If you like what you see today, I'd ask that you give it a thumbs up. And if you want to receive notices of videos as I post them up, be sure to subscribe. The button's just right below. But now we're ready to create. So this is the mini-bendi card done with the Kitchen Gnome stamp and die set. And you can see that it's laying flat, but it bends, and that's how it gets its bendy name, because the band across the front bends when the back is folded and it stands upright so that it can be on display very nicely. But because it lays flat, it can easily be inserted into a standard A2 envelope and be ready to put in the mail. And really, there's no extra postage needed on this one because it isn't that thick. The stamps themselves, this is the Kitchen Gnome stamp and die combination from Close to My Heart. This is such a cute stamp set with 3 different gnomes with kitchen themes, some great sentiments on this, and of course coordinating dies that are perfect so that you don't have to fussy cut. But you know, they're not that difficult if you do want a fussy cut. And Close to My Heart, in the month of April 2021, and it's mid-April right now as I'm recording this, is running a stamp sale. So this stamp set that's normally $18.95 would only be $12.25. And if you wanted it with the dies, it's also reduced. I'll put a link to this set in the information below so that you can check it out if you're interested. The papers that I've used on this lemonade yellow and this lagoon blue, are from another paper pack, another product from Close to My Heart in the March-April catalog for 2021. And this is the Eat, Play, Love paper pack. So you can see over here this yellow plaid, which is lemonade, and then there's this bold piece of lagoon floral strips, and what I did is I just started cutting that into strips that I used on the band here, and it worked perfectly well. So again, I'll put a link to that information down below. Before we start assembling the Kitchen Gnome, this is such a fun set style of a card to use that I just want to go over the basics of how to assemble the card. Then we'll get into actually decorating this one. But I think that once you do one, you're going to be hooked and you're going to want to make more. Again, dimensions I'll put down below, and also they'll be across the banner as we go through this. We start for this card with a background piece that is 5.5 by 4.25, a standard size for any A2 card. You just need one piece for this backing. Then the band can be whatever width you want it to be. I'm just sticking with the dimensions that I'm using here, which is 1 3/4 by 6. I don't need much of a lip to overlap on that, so I'm going to show you how we get this ready to use. I'm going to use my scoreboard, and I am going to put this down here, and I'm going to score it for this piece, which is 5.5. I will score it at 2 3/4. Okay, 2 3/4 for scoring this piece. Now I'm only going through a single layer. I'll be discussing when we actually create this one how to work with 2 layers of paper on there, because it does make a difference as you are scoring. So there I've got my score line at 2 3/4 for this piece. Okay, now I've got my 6-inch piece, and it needs to go across the front of this card base, so I need it to be just 5.5 inches long. So I'm going to score it at 1/4 inch on this side, and it's easier for me just to rotate it and score it at another 1/4 inch. I only have to keep one number in my head. Then I can fold this, and I am ready to work on this. And I am going to just use my bone folder to burnish those folds. I'm going to do the same thing with the card base. Okay? So now you can see I've got this piece that's folded, and I've got the band piece that's going to bend. What I'm going to do is simply take glue and adhere it to these 1/4 inch scored lines and adhere it to the front. I chose to put my band at the very bottom because of the way that my sentiment was behind. But honestly, I've seen other bendies where you can move this band to any position on here based on how you are decorating it with your stamps and whatever else you're putting on it. So for here, I am going to use my paper glue, and I always like to have some kind of clips to hold it in place so that it doesn't pop up, and that's important here. I'm just going to do one side at a time. So I've got my liquid adhesive on here, and I'm going to match this up to the bottom and match it right with the edge of the paper. I want to make sure that my strip is going straight with the bottom of the card front. Okay, I know that that's okay. So I'm going to use my binder clips here, and I'm going to just put that down on there, so that's going to hold that end in place. I'm going to repeat the process on the other side, putting the glue down, and again matching it up with the very edge of my card base. This time I'm going to use my little craft clothespins to secure it in place and hold it there. And now that's it as far as the basic design of this card. I probably would normally let these dry a little bit longer, but I'm just going to take it off and show you that there it is. Okay? Now I have used a lighter color on the front, and you can look inside, but you barely notice that little piece because it's so small. So when I do this card with my yellow on yellow, I don't even notice that that's there, and I don't have to worry about trying to cover it up. So that's quick and easy to assemble a mini bendy card. Let's get ready now to do the kitchen gnome. We're ready to start assembling the gnome, kitchen gnome bendy card. But if you remember, the basics of assembling this is that this band is going to be bending here, particularly at the corners, the edges. And I want to make sure that these extra strips of paper that I'm putting on are going to stay put. So I'm going to work to start with at assembling the band, and then we'll work on the base of the card. I'm going to use some glue, and again, I want to give it time to dry thoroughly before I put it on. Once again, the band is 1 3/4 inches wide and 6 inches long. And we are going to score this so that it has that little edge to hook down. We're going to score it at 1/4 inch on one side. I'm just going to rotate it, and 1/4 inch on the other side. Now, the one thing with Close to My Heart cardstock is that it is double-sided, as far as one side is a little lighter than the other. I want to make sure that I'm going to use this dark side, and I made sure that I had that on the scoreboard that way so that I can then fold it, and this is the side I'm going to use. But what I need to do is I am adding 2 strips, a white strip and this lagoon pattern strip on it. And I want to put glue at the end of it. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and use a light coating of glue on the whole thing so that it goes down and I can move it. There isn't a lot of matting on the white piece that's behind it. So if I have tape on it, sometimes it's not as easy to move about. So I'm just going to stick this down, and I've got that little tiny edge of white on both sides of my lagoon patterned paper. And it is good that I'm moving it with the glue because it didn't want to go down completely straight, but now it is. So that's the first step. So I'm going to let that sit aside, and I'm going to burnish the edges here of this strip, the band. And the critical part for this white piece is going to be this end. So I want to put a little more glue there than I did on just the lagoon piece that I was doing before. And I'm going to put my adhesive along both edges, long edges of the white cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and put this down in the center of my yellow band, just eyeballing it there, putting it down. And then I'm going to do like I did before. I'm going to clamp the ends here so that I know that that part is sticking down and won't pop up on me when that gets put on and is bending a little bit more. So while we work on the background, this will have time to dry and set up. Okay, now as I mentioned before, the background piece for this card base, 5.5 by 4 1/4. I have put this piece of pattern paper onto it. Because it is going to fold and those two folds have to fold together, I find it easiest to adhere the paper and then score it. I've seen people do it the other way. I am more comfortable doing it this way. That being said, when I'm looking at this pattern piece of paper, I want to make sure that I get a lot of adhesive right down the center so that there aren't gaps and it's not going to pucker when I score it and fold it. So to achieve that, I'm just kind of eyeballing where the center of the piece of paper on the back side is. And you're going to see that I am going to be putting down a lot of adhesive, okay? So I'm going to just put row after row, very, very close together across the center of this, okay? And then I still want to have adhesive on all of the other edges as well. And I want these to be as close to the edge as I can get. And that's what I like about these small tape runners, is that I can really see. Sometimes when I'm using my big tape runner, I can't really tell where it's going. So I missed right there. So now you can see all of that adhesive that's on there. Okay, let's go out just a little bit. I'm going to bring in my card base, and I am going to center this on there and eyeballing that. I'm not pushing it down at all until I know that it's where I want it to be, because there's so much adhesive, it's going to be tough. There we go. I've got it all down. A little bit of adhesive is sticking out over there. That part's actually going to get covered up. Otherwise, I would use my rub and remove eraser. Pulled it off there, though. Okay, so now I'm going to burnish from the back side to make sure that all that adhesive that I applied to the center of it is fully down. And then I'm going to bring in my scoreboard again. And I've got my 5.5 inch piece. That means that my halfway point is 2 3/4. Okay? So at 2 3/4, I am going to score this. Now remember, when we did the single layer, I still went over it twice. This is 2 layers plus adhesive, so I am going to go over this at least 3 to 4 times. Okay? And I'm going to look at the back to make sure that I have a crease there. I have it, but I think it needs to be a little bit more. The thing I like about using the scoreboard, I could also just use my paper trimmer and use the cutting trough and run my my bone folder through that. But I know that I'm butted up against that corner, and I'm going to be in the exact same spot for doing this, and I'm just going to go a couple more times. Now I have a bit more of an indentation showing on the other side. And I'm just going to go ahead and fold it directly into itself and fold on that line. So now my card is ready. The backing of the card is ready to go. I do want to go ahead and give that a little bit of a burnish. You might notice sometimes the paper will crack. That's not a problem. It's on the back side. Your center part here is solid. I don't have any puckering where those all that adhesive was, so it has really done a good job of keeping it flat for putting this together. Okay, now my band is ready to go. Okay, and once again, we are going to just be applying this to the front of the card and matching it up with those two edges and gluing it down. And then I am going to add all of my other, sorry, that's off camera, all of my other elements to the card. So I'm going to look at my pattern paper and see if there's a difference between how much of the yellow is showing. There's more at this end than at this end. So this is going to be the bottom of my card. Once again, I'm going to be using my Tombow liquid glue, and I'm going to be putting that glue down on the flap of the first side. And I'm making sure that I've got my pattern the way I want it to be. I want my floral at the bottom. It's a little heavier pattern. And I'm going to match it up here on this left side, making sure that if I lay this down, it's going clear across and matching at the other side as well. So since it's still wet, I want it to hold in place, so I'm going to clamp it down once again. Come on over here and put the glue on this side of my bendy band, and I'm going to put it down directly on the end of the right side. And again, I'm going to grab my binder clips. But before I do that, I just realized as I heard some glue that I'm going to make sure that I don't have any glue sticking there. One time I had to pull a little bit of glue off because too much of it spread out. So I've got those resting on the sections that have the glue on them, and they'll be drying very, very quickly. Now, if you remember, I showed you the stamp set with the gnomes on it. I chose to stick with this "Wishing You a Happy Day" right there because it was a sentiment that is very versatile. It can be used for absolutely anything. This would make a great Mother's Day card. It could be a birthday card. It could just be a, hey, I'm thinking about you. Okay? So what I have done is I have cut out the sentiment, and I cut a square, a stitched square from the white cardstock, and then I stamped. There's this little tiny border piece with this checked pattern. I stamped that down there in the lemonade ink, and then black for the "Wishing You a Happy Day." This square die actually comes from the waterfall card die set, but it has some extra little elements, some banners. It has this circle, scallop square, and this regular stitched square. And that's what I used to do this for the sentiment. And then I've got just a piece of legume cardstock to coordinate with my band. And on this one, I've already put some foam on the back of this sentiment piece so that I can just stick it directly to my other square. And we'll zoom in just a little bit more so that we've got this, and I'm just getting equal distance on there. And that piece is ready to put down when we're ready to put all of the pieces on there. Now, the gnome. I have already colored my gnome, but I stamped him, and then I used the die to cut him out. And as I'm going to put him on here, on my other one right over here, I'm wanting to put some foam underneath him. And I'm using my whisk as an idea of how far up to put the foam, because I don't want my foam to go beyond the band. So I know that my foam can't go above where the whisk is back there. So I'm just going to use, I am using the thin 3D foam that Close to My Heart has, and I like it because I can double layer mounting foam because it's so thin that you can put 2 layers of this thin foam on, and it equals 1 layer of the thicker foam. So if you can see this, I'm putting it down. I'm going to have to trim this piece just a little bit. Okay, I've put it down, but I haven't let it go past where the whisk is, so that when it goes down on the band, it will be fitting just fine. I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit more for us. So now I've also got my spoon and my bowl, which I have cut and colored using a citrus yellow alcohol marker from Spectrum Noir, and I've got my little spoon here. So we're ready to take the clamps off of our card, and you can see that it is bending just like we want it to. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and adhere my Whisking You a Happy Day in the background. And it's going to be centered right there on that section, that left section of the card. So I'm just going to go ahead and add my adhesive. And put that right up there. So it's ready to go. I chose to put it on that side because with the gnome having his whisk in his left hand, I wanted that to be at the center of the card. So now I'm looking at this and deciding kind of where am I going to position these. It does not matter about the fold because the gnome will not be affected by that fold at all. So you can place these anywhere along the line. And I'm looking and seeing that I think I'm going to just kind of bring him close to the center. So I'll remove the backing on the foam and straighten him down there. And I've got him in place. And I'm going to just tape my bowl down, but I've already put some little foam dots on the back of my spoon because I want it to be popped up over the top of the bowl. So the bowl's just going to get a little bit of adhesive there. And I'm going to overlap the band that's on there, maybe a little bit lower there. Okay, and I'll take the adhesive covering off of my foam dots, which is sometimes the hardest part of the entire project. And I'm ready to put my spoon down. Okay, so there's my spoon, and that's the completed card. Isn't that fast and easy? It really, I've said so many times that the fancy fold cards that the fold design itself is not difficult. It's figuring out what you want to put on it that takes the time. But here's an idea for you right out of the box, and I'm hoping that I'll come back with some more ideas later on. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I do hope that you give it a try.